So I have 5 safety tips I wanted to run through. The first easy one to take away to your organization is protect personally identifiable information. If we're using a platform that has open generative AI, it's simple. Staff, students, community members, don't put your personally identifiable information in there because we really don't know who it's going to be reshared with and how it can be used. Or at least make sure they know that they're doing so knowingly and that they consent to it. The second tip for your organization is to have a system and process that you are vetting the tools, the software, the resources that your organization is implementing. So somebody should be responsible for vetting the terms and conditions. If you have a county council or a city attorney, they may be involved in doing a legal review, or you have a tech team that does a data privacy review. That's part of the work we do as attorneys for school districts and public agencies, as we have a streamlined process to go in and vet terms and conditions of various software. So we can make sure that they are safe tools that are being put in the hands of the community and the students and staff. The third tip here for the safety tools is notice. So I mentioned some of your software does automatic updates and they're embedding AI. And when you switch from a closed environment, like let's say educational software used with students, to then incorporating open generative AI, it may exceed the scope of what you originally contracted for or purchased, and it may change the privacy settings and the parental consent requirements. So some organizations are affirmatively asking for notification from the AI software companies that they're notified really explicitly on any open generative AI updates, so it doesn't catch them by surprise. The fourth tip here is threat monitoring. So we work with AI software companies that are putting a lot of AI chatbot tools directly onto cell phones of users, consumers, staff, and students. And with school districts in particular, there usually is a duty to monitor student use of technology or a duty to supervise those students if it's educationally related. So if that's the case, to what extent is either a school district or a city obligated to monitor for threats? And of course, we want to make sure that if you have the capability to monitor for self-harm or a potential school shooting, that there's actually a means in which to intercept the threat and then respond to it, that you have a process in place for response and prevention. That's something we also work on with school districts and agencies on threat monitoring and response protocols, because frankly, there's a big legal liability there if you are not monitoring or you are monitoring but fail to appropriately respond. And then the last piece is, especially for the school boards that might be participating here today, collecting student data through open generative AI changes the consent requirements. So typical educational software, you don't need parent permission because it's part of your curriculum and instruction. And there's limits on who it's reshared with. It's only used within the school community. But open generative AI is resharing it in a way that under a federal Education Privacy Rights Act, it's called FERPA, would require parental consent. And so I have sample consent forms. If that's something anybody's interested in, my email address is on this presentation. Some key components of any type of consent, again, talking about the cities and the counties also. If you're going to be using an open generative AI tool, if you want to provide notice and consent, what would that look like? The purpose and benefits of the AI tool, an explanation of what data is being collected, how it might be reshared. And the lawyer in me says, go ahead and put a liability waiver in there while you're at it. Okay, policy. Many agencies are looking to adopt policy. And the reason why is your staff needs to understand what their responsibilities are. We don't want people willy-nilly adopting tools that might violate people's privacy or not be a safe tool. We also need to be able to hold people accountable if there's misconduct. And in doing that, you usually look back to whatever your policy and procedure is that you have in place. So here's some key elements of AI policy that include equity. I mentioned putting an AI chatbot to your phone. That's great, that's efficient, but it assumes all the users have a phone or that they don't have a disability and that they can engage with it. We encourage that if you're going to put AI chatbot on students' phones, it should also be available on the district website or on their Chromebook that they might have, because it needs to be equitably available to all students or community members. The next piece that is important to remember is that AI can be inherently biased. And so if this is being used in your community or for educational purposes, it's incumbent upon the public agency to make sure that you are not producing and turning around and producing content that is biased. We don't need any sort of discrimination claim or anything of that nature. Accuracy, as you may have heard, AI has the ability to hallucinate. I see this in my legal practice. When I put research, let's say, into ChatGPT, it will just make up the name of cases. And so when your teams are doing research, make sure that, let's say your staff is using it for a lesson plan, that it is not making up the names of battles from the Civil War, that they actually are accurate. So that's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that the content is accurate. And other policy tips, whatever your data privacy evaluation process is, go ahead and make sure that people in your organization are following that process. If permission is needed, such as parent permission, include that as an element. Your organization may want to evaluate whether use of AI triggers any sort of duty to bargain with your union of the terms and conditions of their employment. And then finally, obviously, we want a prohibition on misconduct.